You know, right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, in your line of work, you get paid to listen to this gentleman on a daily basis, or at least when his team is playing the games. Why don't you let everybody know who our guest is today?
Yeah, they had me doing Islanders games quite a bit last year, which was fun. Obviously, coming off back-to-back runs to the Eastern Conference Finals and the semifinals, and especially now that he does playoff games, he's much more well-known. He's currently the voice of the New York Islanders. He's broadcast games since 2016 with legendary Butch Goring. Got to replace the legendary Howie Rose, and we wish Howie Rose, the best with his recent health issues. Again, also covered games for NBC Sports, done a lot of minor league work in the past, so we'll get to talk about that too. Really, really happy to have him on. Mr. Brendan Burke. Brendan, good morning. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm still amazed that I get paid for what I do. So if somebody gets paid for listening to what I do, we're on a whole nother level. I just need to wrap my brain
That's
around.
Joe. It's Joe's job right there.
Yes, I am a content assistant for now. Technically, it's Disney Streaming. It used to be BAMTech, and I do a lot of stuff regarding NHL.com and kind of restructured the company now a little bit here in the last couple of weeks. But I used to do that, and I used to do stuff for MLB.com, which I no longer do anymore. So that's my side of things. And yes, I do get to listen to you, and I get to watch you mostly on a nightly basis. I get to watch the Knicks, the Rangers, and the Islanders a lot. So
All right, as long as you're choosing the right calls on all these, we're all set.
Yeah. So if you ever want to go like the next day and check out some highlights, it's because of this guy Joe right here. He's picking the calls and everything. Sending over.
All right. If I screw up, make sure that those never see the light of day. All right.
You don't screw up often. You're actually very, very good. You're one of the best in the biz at what you do. And I mean, that's pretty obvious now, because anybody who was asked for NBC purposes to do playoff games and other games and stuff like that, you must be very, very good at your job. And you definitely are. You're definitely one of the best in the business. And, unfortunately, Nick and I are Rangers fans, but you do make Islanders games fun to listen to. So
I will take that for sure. If it's come from Ranger fans, I'll take it.
Brendan, do you know yet if you're going to be on the road with the team this season, and what kind of challenges did you have calling games off monitors?
Yeah, I think there's still some details being worked out on everything around the league. So hopefully get some clarity on that here soon. But working off a monitor was something that you never want to do. It's never preferred. It was nice to be home a little bit more, which I had a baby in November, so it was actually kind of fortuitous to be home as much as I was around that time. Granted, the season hadn't even started at that point, but in the early goings. But it's just a challenge. Like, I think sometimes when people hear, oh, they're calling games off monitors, they think I'm sitting in this control room with a wall of monitors and can look at it. I'm literally doing, I could be sitting next to you on your couch. I'm not seeing anything that you're not seeing, and I'm trying to do my job off that. So you really learn which cities have good cameramen and which cities do not. Unfortunately, if the puck leaves the screen when I'm in person, not a big deal, right? Like, if it takes a bit just for the camera to follow it and I'm watching and I'm tracking, not a big deal. But when I'm relying on that, it's a different story. So it presents its challenges. I think I got a little more comfortable as the season went along and trying to get through some of that, and you just kind of delay your call, kind of talk your way through it if you need an extra second. You miss penalties because they're behind the play, and the referee with his arm up, you don't see, and you're like, oh, there's a whistle. I think there's a penalty, I guess. Guys sneaking off on line changes, guys that get hurt, scuffles behind the play, fights, things like that. Like, you lose a lot of that stuff. Guys limping to the bench, and you can't even mention it because you don't see it. So there are things that you lose, and it's much better to be in person. But hockey off monitor is better than no hockey at all. So we did what we had to do to get through the season, and hopefully we can get a little more normal here moving forward.
Right. And, you've been doing hockey for a while, so you're very used to the team. So as you mentioned, you kind of maybe fill a few seconds here or there if you had to. But the Olympics, a whole different story. How is it, doing the Olympics from a little closet in Connecticut?
Yeah, it was. I guess I don't have anything to compare it to. Like I've never done an Olympics in person, and I've never done rowing or canoeing in my life until then. So this is really my only experience at it. But it was a great. It was so many people were involved in the production of the Olympics, as you might imagine, and so many of them were in Stamford, Connecticut for almost 3 weeks, like I was, working at all hours of the night. Tokyo's 13 hours ahead, so races at 9 o'clock in the morning for me were 8 p.m. in Connecticut. And so I was one of the first people to get to work at night, worked like 8 till midnight, 8 till 1 in the morning for the races. And then on my way out, I would see, Kenny Albert coming in to do, his stuff. I would see Paul Burmeister coming in to do water polo. I would see Ed Cohen coming in to do weightlifting, and they were coming in for, matches at 2 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, things like that. And I was on my way home to prep for the next day and to get to bed. But, NBC did a really, really good job of trying to make it a great experience for the people that were there. I think the night of opening ceremonies, they brought in sushi. Like they just had, candy imported from Japan to try and make you feel a little bit more like you were there. And they really did a nice job to make it a great experience, considering that we were in Stamford, Connecticut, and not in Tokyo.
Kenny Albert, a former guest on our show, there was a historic moment in this Olympics where, because obviously daytime here, things weren't live, where Kenny Albert threw to himself. He went from one event to broadcasting to another. And I don't know if that's ever been done before, Olympic history. Quite
probably not. He was doing volleyball, right? And then they added on some baseball games to him. So I think that he was originally only supposed to do volleyball. Then he wound up getting a couple extra baseball games because he's as good as it gets with so many different things. So yeah, the unique circumstances for sure. Normally though, Kenny and I have thrown to each other for hockey games, but I don't think anybody ever pictured Kenny Albert throwing a volleyball match to me doing canoeing. That was probably something that most people weren't ready for.
Right, a little, not too far away from now is the Winter Olympics. Do you know if you'll be involved in that at all, doing hockey?
We'll find out. I'm not actually sure, so we're still got a little bit of time.
It's going to be exciting though, right, Joe? We got the NHL players finally back.
Yeah, that was something that they honestly really wanted, and I'm glad that they were able to hash that out because, the Olympics I think needed the players. We did the Winter Olympics back when, so I think it was like 2018, right? And I mean, it clearly was not the same. There was no jolt to it. A lot of players are always very happy and proud to represent their countries in the game. So hopefully that'll be different, and hopefully, Brendan, you'll be asked to do it again, because we know that the NBC does not have the coverage of the NHL anymore. We know that has been taken away. It is now to ESPN and Turner. So, hopefully that'll eventually sort itself out and you'll have the opportunity presented to yourself to do that again.
Hey, the way I'm looking at it is either I'm doing Olympic hockey or I get a nice long vacation in the middle of the hockey season. So either way,
it's a win-win. So you are an Ithaca College grad, studied journalism there. When did you make the decision? Was it before college, during college, that you said, hey, I want to pursue a career in an on-air capacity somehow?
9 years old. I was 9 years old when I made that decision, and never wavered. I grew up, my dad's a sports writer. He works for the New York Post, and I grew up around New York City. My dad was actually the Yankees beat writer for first the Bergen Record, then the Newark Star Ledger. And so I kind of grew up around sports media, and was afforded some incredible opportunities as a young child to, be in that area where, be exposed to it, where I don't know if a lot of kids are. And so I, at 9 years old, had the opportunity to go to Fenway Park with my dad. It was summertime, my birthday's in July, and, if there were short road trips, we would go and hang out with dad. And so I went to a game at Fenway Park, and my dad had to work. So it's not like I could sit there on his lap while he was doing his work, but he found me a pretty good seat. And the seat that he found me was directly between John Sterling and Michael Kay while they called the game on radio. They were together on radio at that point, now obviously separate on TV and radio, but they worked together. This is back in the early 90s. And that's where I watched the game from. And to have that experience and to watch these guys do it. And then shortly after that experience, I found out they got paid to do that, which blew my 9-year-old mind that was their job, right? There are doctors and lawyers and firemen, and that they sit there in the best seat in the house and talk about baseball, and they get paid for it. And ever since that moment, that's what I've always wanted to do. And, everybody's like, oh, wait till you get to college, you'll change your mind, interests will change, and you're just a kid. And the only thing it did was I wanted to do it more. And the more I learned about it, and the more I started doing it, the more I wanted to be involved with it. And so I'm fortunate enough to have, that story of being a 9-year-old kid that decides what he wants to do and then actually getting to do it. So when I say this is my dream job and that I'm living the dream, I'm not just saying that. It is actually what I dreamed about as a kid that I wanted to do. And here I am doing it.
So I wanted to bring up your dad for a second because you moved to Fairlawn. Now, I don't know what age you moved to Fairlawn, but you were actually born in Wisconsin, and your dad was a sports writer there first, right? So he covered the major teams there, the Packers, obviously in Green Bay, the Brewers. They don't have a hockey team, but they do have an American Hockey League team. So he started there, and then when you guys moved here, he was able to get that the job at the Bergen Record.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. So Nick mentioned you went to Ithaca. What kind of internships did you do there? What kind of stuff were you involved in on campus? And what kind of things did you do and connections did you make that ultimately helped you transition and find your first job outside of college?
Yeah, most of what helped me was actually what I did at Ithaca. And, Ithaca College is a great program. It has 2 student-run radio stations and a student-run television station, where there is one faculty member that is in charge of all of that just kind of oversees things. But there's elections, and you are the sports director, you are the station manager, you are whatever. They're all students, usually older, upperclassmen. Ed Cohen, who's the voice of the New York Knicks on radio, Ed is a year ahead of me in school. And so my sophomore year, I was the sports director of one radio station, and Ed Cohen was the sports director of the other radio station. Which is pretty cool now. We bump into each other in the city or at MSG Networks meetings and things like that we can look back and go, yeah, remember when we were running student radio stations at Ithaca? But you do everything, on the air, off the air, is all student run. And so I did everything you could possibly do. I did sports updates starting the first week of my freshman year on the radio stations. I hosted morning shows. I DJ'd, late night shows. I was on, the TV staff. I did field hockey halftime shows. I mean, whatever it was, I did it. I would actually just sit there in the meeting like this with my arm up the whole time, volunteer for whatever they wanted me to do, because that's what I was there for. I wasn't there to, take a math class. I was there to broadcast games. And so that's what I did as much as I could to get as much reps as I could. And I walked out of college with a lot of experience that I think a lot of kids didn't get. The toughest thing about broadcasting is that they want you to have experience to get jobs, and you can't get experience without jobs sometimes. You have to kind of make it yourself. So I did everything that I possibly could. I would spend my free nights and weekends, especially as a senior, doing games by myself. I would take a mini disc recorder to Cornell's rink, which is right across on the other hill, and do women's hockey games by myself, just to get more reps, just to get more tape that I can make a demo out of. And I wound up getting a job in the ECHL straight out of college with a tape of a game that I did by myself of Cornell women's hockey. That was all I had. So, I spent a lot of time in school dedicated to what I wanted to do in life. And then, during the summertime, I came back and I lived in New Jersey. And so I lived right outside New York City. So I had some good internships. I interned at ESPN Radio in New York City my first summer. And this was, the very beginnings of ESPN Radio in New York City, specifically of 1050 at the time. And I mean, I'm saying I was an intern. I literally would hand out pamphlets in Times Square saying, listen to 1050 ESPN Radio. It's new sports station. Here you go. Like, that's what I was doing. I was a marketing intern, right? So I eventually worked up to answer some phones for afternoon shows, and that was a big deal. But I did that. I actually interned, came back and interned with John Sterling at the Yankees radio broadcast after my sophomore year, and kind of completed that circle, which was kind of fun. And I took advantage of the Ithaca College program where you get to study abroad, which is Los Angeles in the communications department. It's kind of a loophole for journalism students. It's made for the film and the TV students that need to go to LA where they make film and television. And the journalism kids just sign up for a semester in the sun. And so I interned at Fox Sports West out there and at KNBC out there and just log tape and did some fun stuff. But got some experience and then started climbing the ladder in the minor league radio side of things when I got out of school. So it's been a journey.
Yeah, so you obviously put together a great demo right out of school. You go right into doing minor league baseball. From there, you just mentioned doing the minor league hockey. For you coming out, did you have a mindset of, I specifically want to ultimately try to do this one particular sport, or are you like, I'm going to do whatever I can? It doesn't matter to me what sport I'm going towards.
So I had kind of a turning point of my freshman year of college. I always thought I would do baseball. I always thought I was going to be a baseball guy. Like I said, I had the background in baseball with my dad and with just my spark for broadcasting generated from baseball. And so that's kind of where I always envisioned doing growing up. And then I called my first baseball game in college, and it was hard, man. Like it was hard. And I was not prepared, and you don't know how to prepare until you do something, right? And then you're like, oh man, I was not ready for this. And I kind of had that moment where I didn't like it, right? Like you gear yourself up for 10 years. I had been going, I'm going to be a baseball broadcaster. Then I did my first baseball game. I'm like, this is awful. I do not want to do this again. And it was just youth and inexperience and not really understanding what to do. But I called my dad afterwards. I'm like, Dad, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't like it. He's like, it's your first game, man. Like your first game. And I think part of me was, I had almost forgotten that because I'd been so involved in being a broadcaster that I forgot I wasn't actually a broadcaster, that this was the first game I'd ever called. But that moment kind of opened me up to, maybe it's not baseball. Maybe it's just sports and broadcasting. And that's when like I said, I did everything I could possibly do in college. I did basketball, I did football, I did baseball, I did hockey, I did soccer, I did all these different things. And I realized that it wasn't the sport. It was broadcasting that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed being in the element and doing that. And so I started doing some hockey games, and I realized, and other people realized, I was kind of good at it because I played hockey my whole life. Like baseball was always what I thought I would broadcast. But being born in Wisconsin, you kind of play hockey. That's kind of what you do, right? In Milwaukee and Minnesota and Michigan, like you just play hockey. That's kind of how it goes. So I played hockey from the time I was 4 years old all the way up through high school. And I was actually on the club hockey team at Ithaca College. Like I played hockey my whole life. So I had a really good understanding for it. And so then when it became combining my passion for broadcasting with my passion for hockey and my knowledge of hockey, it kind of worked really well together. And so when I got out of school, I got a job doing minor league baseball with the Batavia Muck Dogs of the New York Penn League. And I got a job that fall doing the Wheeling Nailers of the ECHL. And for 3 years, I bounced back and forth from hockey to baseball, no off season, just grinding right on through. And everybody would ask, like, what do you want to do? You want to do hockey or baseball? And my thought was at that time, let's see who takes me with it, right? Like I'm looking for the next job in both sports. Let's see where it goes. And I was fortunate enough to get a job at the AHL level, which is, a step below the NHL in Peoria, Illinois at 24 years old. And so that kind of sealed my fate, if you will. It stopped me from being able to go do baseball during the off season because it was a longer season and things overlapped. And so kind of made my choice for me. And I was one step below the NHL. I thought I was in a pretty good spot. And so I kind of stuck with hockey. But if a AA or AAA baseball team had called me a month before, who knows where I'd be right now. But hockey kind of took me with it, and I'm very, very happy and thankful that it did.
Yeah, you have a voice for hockey, I think. And I think the cadence, the flow of each game is very different. The terminology obviously is very different. And I think ultimately you made the best decision. I don't have to tell you that. So when you were working with Peoria, you had the opportunity to fill in with the Blues a couple of times, right? So
Yeah.
Was that your first real taste of doing stuff for an NHL team? And who was the person who helped you get that opportunity?
Yeah, Chris Kerber's the guy. He's still the radio voice of the St. Louis Blues. So there's a couple of things here. Yes, I filled in for Chris for a span of 3 games. His dad had gotten sick, and so he needed to leave the team. And so it was an emergency basis where, hey, can you get to Nashville tomorrow? I'm like, sure, let's go. But prior to that, I had, St. Louis was 3 hours from Peoria. So it wasn't out of the realm to just shoot down and go to a game. and the Rivermen owned their own team bus, and every once in a while they would take a bus full of fans down to a Blues game. And when they did that, I would go, and I would just jump in the cab of the truck and just head on down with the team, with the fans. And I would get a credential from the guys in St. Louis, and they were great. And I would go up to the press box. And I think it was my second or third year. I'm 25 years old, probably, maybe 26. And I go up to the press box and I just stop in the radio booth. I like to, at that point, just as a networking opportunity, just say, hey, remember me, that kid in Peoria? Like I'm here if you ever need anything. And so I would go up and harass the broadcasters and say hi to John Kelly and Darren Pang. And then I would go next door and go to the radio guys. And Chris Kerber's there. And I just said, hey, Kerbs, what's going on? He's like, oh, Brendan, what are you doing here? It's like, just, bus coming down, figured I'd jump in. He goes, you want to call the second period? Me? Like, this is at 6 o'clock for a 7 o'clock game. And I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah, go get some game notes, take a look at them, come back at the end of the first period. Okay. So I'm literally just grabbing game notes and just studying. My heart's going 100 miles an hour. And he threw me on. I mean, he literally said, there was 3 headsets. He was on one, I was on one. Kelly Chase was on the other as the color guy. And he was like, for the second period, we're going to hand things over to the voice of the Peoria Rivermen. Here's Brendan Burke. Headset off, walked out of the room. Just straight up, here you go. And so, baptism by fire. And so it was a St. Louis Blues against Columbus Blue Jackets game. And I did the second period, and it was amazing. And it was also a turning point where it was like, hey, you can do this, man. Like, it's just hockey. And so I kind of got that confidence of being able to do it. And a really cool experience. And so I'm so thankful for that. And at that point now I've got a demo, right? Like I've got NHL demo.
Yeah, I was going to ask you before the game even ended, how quickly were you going to the producers saying, I need that tape?
Oh, yeah, no, they knew, right? Like they knew that it was going to be a big deal. And so they had it ready for me. They're like, I will email you links to it. It's in a Dropbox. We'll get it to you. I had it, it was all edited up into highlights and all this kind of, it was fantastic. They were really good. But so I was able to do a period there and just kind of, it reinforced them like this, I need to get here. Like, this is where I need to be. This was so much fun. And so I was able to do that. And the next year it worked out where the Rivermen were playing a game in Minnesota against the Wild's AHL team. The Blues were there too. I saw him at morning skate. He goes, you want another period? I'm like, absolutely. Came up and did it again. So a couple of times he had given me, and the story is, and it's a great story. I forget who it was, but somebody did that for him when he was in Springfield in the AHL. And he used that tape to get the Blues job. And he has always tried to pay it forward. And I'm not the only person he's done that for. He did that for Tom Callahan, who was in Peoria before me, who wound up briefly being the voice of the Nashville Predators. He's done that for a few other AHL guys of just, hey, it's a Tuesday night in January. It's the second period in Blues and Blue Jackets. Like, here you go. Like, this means way more to you than it does to me, and you're not going to screw it up. So he's just that kind of guy. And so, but by doing those periods and showing everybody that I could do them when he needed to step away from the team, I was an easy phone call. They knew that I could handle it. And so they called me. I scrambled to Nashville. I wound up doing 3 games right before Christmas that next season. And from there, I really had an NHL tape and some good NHL experience that has helped me ultimately to get where I am today. So tip of the cap to Chris Kerber and giving me that opportunity to get here, because that was a big step and a big part of it.
Always got to be in the right place at the right time.
Yep.
Wow, that's an unbelievable story. I've never heard of a story like that where he was just able to get you in there and do that on the fly. That is incredible. So cool. But you did work elsewhere in between. You moved to work for Utica Comets. So how long were you there? I believe you were there, 2 years or 3 years? 3 years.
Yeah.
So you worked there 3 years, and you did 3 years there. And then ultimately you got the call to replace Howie Rose and work for the Islanders. So who else was instrumental in getting you there back here to New York?
Well, it was an interesting process, right? So the Peoria Rivermen were owned by the St. Louis Blues, and they sold the team. They sold the franchise. Unbeknownst to all the employees, they sold the franchise. And so one day I went to work, and all of a sudden it was all over the news that there would be no more Peoria Rivermen. And later that day, found out I was going to be unemployed. And so I was literally unemployed. I was collecting unemployment, living in Peoria, Illinois, not having any idea where my life was headed. I was out of a job, out of hockey, out of sports in general, and just kind of waiting and hoping that I would get that next opportunity. And fortunately enough for me, they sold the franchise to the Vancouver Canucks, who placed it in Utica, New York. If they had placed it in Canada, which they were certainly looking at, and they've now moved their AHL affiliate to Canada, I would have been out of a job completely. Now, because they put it in New York, it enabled me to try and get my job back. And I did. I was pretty convinced that I was pretty convinced of myself that I could convince whoever was in charge that I was the best person with the job, because it was my job. Like, it was literally my job. And so, strangely enough, Utica, New York is where my wife was from. My wife was born and raised in Herkimer, which is just down the road from Utica a little bit. And so it just felt like, all right, if they had placed it somewhere else, maybe it wouldn't have been as automatic of, hey, you need to go get this job. I had been doing pro hockey for 8 years already. Maybe it was time for something new. But putting it there specifically, and having her have the ability to kind of go home, and her parents still live there and her grandma still lived there, to go home and do that was pretty special. So Robert Esch, former NHL goaltender, was the president of that hockey team. And so with a few connections, I was able to get his phone number and give him a call and kind of convince him, like, hey, you don't need to look anywhere else. Like, I'm your guy. And credit to him, he fell for it. So I was hired there and worked there for 3 years, and worked really hard and waited for that opportunity, and had a couple of close calls with other job openings that ultimately didn't happen. And it led me to applying for the Islanders job when Howie Rose decided he was done doing two sports for 20 years and was just going to do baseball. And so it became an open competition to replace him. And so thankful that the stars really aligned to have me be that guy. So it was quite a journey.
So you say you applied for the job. I mean, this isn't a regular job here. There's only so many of these positions. What was that process like? Did you know somebody within the organization, reaching out to them? Did you have an agent or something? How did you get your demo into the right hands in order to you be considered for the job? And then did you ultimately have to maybe come in, call a fake game off a monitor? And how did that process go for you?
Yeah, it was a long process. I was sitting in my office in Utica I think it was late May, and saw on Twitter, or whatever, it was a Neil Best story that Howie Rose is retiring from the Islanders broadcast. And you get excited. As an AHL broadcaster, it doesn't even matter if you're going to get that job. You just want to see movement. You want to see, all right, Howie Rose is leaving. Islanders TV's open. Maybe Islanders radio, maybe Chris King slides up into that spot. Now Islanders radio's open. Now you can go for that. Like, you just hope maybe somebody from a smaller market, if it's Columbus, decides to go after the Islanders job. Now that one's open. You just want the most amount of opportunities to apply for a job and have people listen to your stuff, that maybe you catch the right person on the right day that says, hey, this guy's good, let's get him. So you get excited just that there's any sort of openings in the NHL. But obviously, with it being Howie, with it being New York City, where I somewhat grew up just outside of it, that's where I was really excited, because I was like, all right, hey, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, there's an opening with the Islanders. This would be a great spot for me. I do have an agent. And so immediately I called him, and he said, we're on it. I have had a relationship with Howie prior to this, because, as I said, my dad's a sports writer. He did cover the Mets for a few years. When I was in college, he covered the Mets. And so he and Howie had known each other. And Howie was the guy that, when I was in college, was somebody that I could call for advice, somebody that I could send my tape to and have him critique it, both baseball and hockey, which was kind of nice, and kind of give me pointers. So that was a different relationship, right? That's a college kid and a professional in the industry. But I knew Howie, and I had his number, I had his email address. And so I kind of sent him a note, like a, hey, congratulations type of note, to just be like, hey, remember me? And he responded, and I should probably find the email. I probably have it somewhere, but he responded. It was a one-word email, or one-line email. It just said, don't worry, they know exactly who you are. And so it was like, all right, now we're talking. So, Howie had at least put the bug in their ear, like, hey, this kid in Utica is not bad. And so then it became sending stuff, and then they heard it, they liked it, they said, send us more stuff, send them more stuff, and worked my way into the round of interviews, in-person interviews, back when you used to meet people face to face, in the old times. So I went down to New York City, and I had an interview with the executives at MSG, and I think they interviewed 10 people at that point. Like, it was just, there were hundreds of people that applied, right? Like, I had been narrowed down to the top 10. And then after the interview round, I think it was 5 people that got to audition for the job. And so they brought us in individually. I don't even know who else was scheduled to do it, but I went in on a July morning at 9 a.m. and had to call a game, which was very unnatural. It's like 100 degrees outside. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, oh yeah, pretend it's January and call a hockey game. So I did that, and it was great because they brought in Butch Goring, right? Like, Butch was there to provide his normal analysis to the game, and so you could see how we worked together, and we could see how I could call a game. But it was hard, right? It's off a monitor, which at that point I had never done, never called a game off a monitor in my life. You're calling a game. You're prepared for it, but it's awkward, and it's off a monitor, and you have the nerves of your entire career riding on these next few minutes, right? Like, this is your opportunity. All those 10 years of minor league hockey that I had was only to get me in this door, right? Like, that was all that it was going to do, was get me in that door. Now the next 10 minutes of my life are going to decide where this goes. So it was kind of a big moment, right? Like, you've got all of that inside you. Plus, it's July. I haven't called a game since late April. So you're not in rhythm, right? Like, I haven't called a game in months. So I remember going through it, and I called the first segment, I think, that you get, and you throw it to commercial break, fake commercial break. And then you did another segment and threw it to another break. And I was like, all right, like, now I feel okay. Like, now I'm ready to go. Like, let's do this. And I hear Mayor, hey, thank you so much for coming. That was great. Damn it, it's over. That was it. So they're going to judge you off what you had already done before you felt like you were actually okay. But thankfully enough, I did a good enough job on that, and I guess I didn't piss off Butch Goring in the process, where he's like, no, not that guy. And they again took a long time. It was like another month of kind of waiting and updates of, oh yeah, we're I think it was just people taking vacation, right? Like, it's the middle of the summer. People are like, oh, that guy's not in the office. We'll make the decision next week, type of thing. And it was early August when they finally offered me the job. So from late May to early August, and then the scramble towards moving my whole life to Brooklyn and getting ready for the season in a month's time was it was a fun time in my life, I'll tell you what.
For you, what's the biggest difference when it comes to broadcasting for radio versus TV? Maybe on TV, you figure you could allow to breathe a little more. Radio, you got to be on top of everything. But you personally, do you change the way you call a game between the two mediums?
Yeah, there's two major differences for me. One is that television is an analyst-driven medium. You can see who has the puck, where they are on the ice, what team they're on. You can see all that kind of stuff. So what you can't see is what's inside a guy who's won 4 Stanley Cups head, right? Like that, I want to hear what he has to say watching the game. And on TV, 100%, my job is to make sure the analyst is doing his job, setting him up, asking him questions, giving him room to talk. That's what a TV play-by-play guy should be doing. It is giving the analyst room to shine. On radio, you can't do that. On radio, your job is to inform the people of what they're not seeing. So that right there is the biggest difference for me in terms of how you treat a radio broadcast versus how you treat a TV broadcast. On top of that, radio stays the same. Radio, your job is to inform them of what they can't see and to provide as much detail and color and make it entertaining as you can. On TV, I kind of view the play-by-play role more of you have to find a way to transfer the energy and emotion that is in the building to the people at home that they wouldn't get, right? Like you think about, you can think about games this year where there's no crowd, right? Even with no crowd, if the play-by-play guy is doing his job, you still feel it. You don't if it's on mute, right? You can watch a game on mute, you don't feel it. If the play-by-play guy is doing his job, you feel it. And I want the person watching at home to feel the same way as the guy watching in the fifth row. That's how I view my job on TV. I'm trying to get that energy through to the person watching. And so it's less about the information and more about the delivery, to be honest. Like it's more about that cadence, that pace, that motion, that energy that you can bring through, if you can enunciate or punctuate at the right moment to kind of get everybody's heart to jump and skip a beat a little bit, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that, oh, you just missed it. And you want to feel that, not just hear it, you want to feel it. And so that's how I treat the difference between, and you can do that on TV. I'm not saying you can do that on radio. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying that that's your primary job, because you don't have to fill in all the information, but you have to find a way to get that feeling through the TV.
Yeah, and it definitely depends on the arena as well. Obviously, with Barclays, didn't really get as loud. Nassau Coliseum, absolutely wild. You could hear it, you could sense it on TV when there was fans there. Now you're going to have a nice new arena, UBS Arena. Have you gotten any sort of sneak peeks in there as far as what your vantage point is going to be for calling these games?
Yeah, I've been in there. I've been in there a couple of times. Still have to wear the hard hat, and it was still dirt floors when I was in there. But it's gonna be incredible. And I keep seeing people send me pictures of what it looks like in there now, and it's amazing, because last time, like I said, I was in there, it was kind of dirt floors, and all the windows hadn't been placed in. You were still kind of inside, kind of outside type of thing. I mean, and now it's got a video board hanging in it and seats in it, and so it's getting close, and you can start to I guess marry the visions and the drawings and the renderings to actually what it looks like in real life, and it is going to be spectacular. So it's not lost on me that I have the opportunity to be part of a team that is opening a brand new building. That is, there are broadcasters that work for a team for 25 years and never get that opportunity, right? If you come in at the wrong time and they opened it 5 years earlier, you're going to spend your whole career in whatever arena that is, right? So I'm very fortunate that I came in at this time, and I'm glad Howie hasn't come out of retirement and stolen it back just because of this, because Howie left at the same time the new ownership came in. Howie left, and John Ledecky and Scott Malkin came in as the owners the same summer that I came in. The last part of that process, by the way, of getting hired was a one-on-one interview with John Ledecky. And it's one of the best nights of my life. It wasn't a boardroom meeting. We literally met at Citi Field for a Yankees Mets game and hung out and watched some baseball and talked, and just, made sure that he felt comfortable that I was the guy for his team. And so, he and I have had a great relationship since then. But I think the one thing for Howie is that he never got to experience what life was like as an Islander broadcaster with the new ownership. And I'm fortunate that that's the only thing that I've been able to experience. So he went through a lot of lean years and a lot of interesting times. And, I'm grateful that I kind of came out on the other end, but he laid the groundwork for what I'm about to experience with the new arena and this new ownership group. It's been great. So I'm excited to have come in at a time where the team has gone like this, and the ownership has gone like this, and the arena has gone like this, and I'm just hanging on for the ride.
Yeah, Howie got to go deal with John Spanos and all that wildness, but now the new arena, it's out there a bit. What's your commute like, or are you going to interrupt your marriage to bring hockey season again? Perhaps going to have to impact your, love that sign there. You're going to have to impact your day, longer commute. How does that all factor into your game plan here for the season?
Yeah, I'm out east already, so it took me almost a half hour to get to the Coliseum. So it'll probably take me about 10 minutes more to go a little bit farther west to get through.
How was your commute to the Barclays Center?
So when I got the job, the Islanders were exclusively in Brooklyn. There was no Coliseum games, so I moved to Brooklyn. So I walked to the games.
Wow,
it was
nice.
you can't beat that. I was literally home by the time Shannon was done with her post game show. I mean, I just walked out the door, walked down the street, and I was home. So it's hard to beat that. I had no problem with the games in Brooklyn. I would jump in the shower at 3:30, and I had a 4:30 production meeting. Just boom, walk over. Obviously, when things were going back and forth, I could tell once they solidified that they were breaking ground on UBS and they were splitting games to the Coliseum. Then I moved out. I live in Huntington now, out on the island. So it'll be a little bit longer. And I would actually carpool in with Butch Goring. We went to Brooklyn the last couple of years. So I would drive to Butch's house. Butch and I and one of the head off ice official, we would all drive together into Brooklyn, and it'd make it easier to park one car than three. And we had a nice little spot to go to, and it made the days a little bit longer, but ultimately not too bad. We go at good times, right? Like, we're not going at 7:00. We're not going for 7:00. We're there by 4, and we're out after the game. So traffic usually wasn't too bad, but a little bit longer of a commute than it is to stay here on the island.
All right, now I'm going to ask you my favorite question to ask broadcasters. Joe knows where I'm going in this.
I know where.
I want to know your, your pregame, during game routine as far as food and beverage intake. Obviously, it's not like if you go to the bathroom, I got to run. You have a very limited time between periods. If you're going to overtime, forget about it. And you want to have energy. We've had different people on. Doc Emmerich was on with us. He said, I always ate oatmeal. I feel like it gave me more energy boost. If other people saying, oh, well, I didn't want to eat too much before the game. I don't want to get sick. Other people are like, well, in between periods, I'm crushing hot pretzels and cookies and whatnot. So just curious to hear your routine as far as like, are you eating before the game, between the periods, and are you drinking water? Try not to take in too many beverages. Maybe you're a lozenge guy. Just want to hear your whole process there.
Yeah, I guess I'm not one of those guys that overthinks it too much. I make sure I eat. Normally we eat at 4:30 or so when we get there, kind of back again when they had media rooms and press meals and things like that. Just kind of eat when you get to the arena at 4:30, 5 o'clock, just so you're kind of done with that. And you want to make sure you're not hungry at 8 o'clock, right? That's what you don't want to be thinking about anything other than the game. You don't want to be like, man, I'm starving. I can't wait till this game's over so I can get some pizza. Like, that's not a thought you want going through your mind while you're calling game. It's more for the mental side of it than anything else. So I don't necessarily eat anything specific. I'll pretty much just eat whatever's available. And then I drink water constantly. And I'm fortunate enough on TV that I don't have to fill the intermissions all that often. Sometimes in the third period, overtimes, you don't get that break between overtime or a shootout, and sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable. But I drink bottles of water. They have a case of water just sitting there. My stage manager, JT, is fantastic. I don't even have to open my water bottles. He twists them off the top and just hands them to me. But I drink and when I say constantly, I mean when Butch is talking, I'm drinking water.
No.
Like, it's not just at commercial breaks. Like,
you're holding down that cough button. There you go. Gulping on.
Yep. So, it's just one of those things where I'm just constantly drinking water. So, but if there was a seltzer there, or there was something else, that my partner for Lacrosse, he loves Lacroix. So we drink a little Pamplemousse Lacroix during Lacrosse broadcasts. Like, I don't mind that either. Sometimes the bubbles are not the ideal thing to drink, but and the one nice thing about Barclays Center, which since we've been talking about it, is we had a low vantage point at Barclays. We're kind of right in the crowd where radio was across the way, and a lot of other people were upstairs or in a corner upstairs. We were on suite level basically, and so we didn't have a press room to go and grab a cup of coffee, which I will do at some point in the second intermission, usually, to wake yourself up if you feel like you need it. But we actually are right around the corner from where the owner's suite is. And the owners gave us full blessing and carte blanche to come in and grab whatever we need from their fully catered suite during those games. And so Butch and I would often go in and grab a coffee, or maybe a random snack or dessert or whatever is there. There's some really good food in there. So a lot of times we would find a way to go in there and grab some stuff. And I did make a request that our vantage point at UBS Arena is close to the owner's suite again. We'll see if that actually happens, but that was a nice perk to have, to be able to walk in there and grab whatever we wanted. So that was fun.
Yeah, doesn't get much better than that, going into the owner's suite, I could imagine. Now with NBC, obviously you get that opportunity. Was that something that you were able to get based on the fact that you're working with the Islanders job? And then ultimately you mentioned Lacrosse. You do a lot of lacrosse for the Premier Lacrosse for NBC. How did you get that opportunity, and what was your lacrosse experience prior to ultimately becoming a broadcaster for it?
Zero. We'll get there. So the NBC relationship is fun. I mean, I assume that the Islanders being in New York helped me get on the TV of the people that make decisions at NBC a little bit more frequently, because they're based out of Stamford, Connecticut. So they don't need a special package to watch the Islanders. They just need to flip their remote a little bit. And so you've got, the people that make the decisions at NBC at home can watch the Islanders, Devils, and Rangers without even trying. So I'm assuming that helped my exposure. And then it's just something where you hope you catch their eye. everybody in the league wants to do games on national television, right? So it's not something that you really apply for because they know who you are and you know who they are. And if they need you, they'll call you, type of thing. And I was fortunate enough to, get a call towards the end of my very first year in the NHL, which I never really expected. I was, one step at a time, right? Like you just got to the NHL, you kind of skipped the radio step, you kind of skipped the small market thing and just went to big market television. Like, let's calm down. And so I think in my head, I never really verbalized it, but I think it was like a 5-year thing. Like, all right, let's do 5 years. And then hopefully I can get on the radar of an NBC or whoever has the rights and start doing some national games. So for them to call me, or my agent really, at the end of my first season, Islanders were missing the playoffs, and just say, we'd love to bring you on to do some playoff games, was mind blowing. And they initially offered me, and again, this is kind of the same, it's like trial and error. They're going to give me a shot. They offered me games 1 through 4 of an Edmonton San Jose series, which is late night, right? East Coast, the worst time slot, which, not complaining, I'll take it for sure. Give me the West Coast all day long. Give me the Canadian team all day long, right? You're not even talking about 2 full American markets. And it was a backbench game, which is before we did games off a monitor, we would do games in person, but using the home television feed. So we would be doing the San Jose broadcast. If you watch San Jose's broadcast and you watched NBC's broadcast, they would look identical, but they would sound different. And so we didn't have control over the picture. So if I wanted to talk about Connor McDavid and they are showing a shot of Martin Jones, sorry, we're looking at Martin Jones while you're talking about Connor McDavid. We didn't have the ability to kind of marry that up. So it was kind of like a half broadcast, right? So it was like, this is where you're starting. You're starting with games 1 through 4. We're not giving you any clinchers. You're just doing games 1 through 4 for a West Coast feed and a backbench game. Fine. Happy to do it. Turns into a 5-game series. They go, okay, you can do game 5. Turns into a 6-game series. You can do game 6. Great. Got a clincher, got to do 6 games. Series is over. Flew all the way home. Happy with myself. Felt like, all right, I did a pretty good job on my first national exposure. Great. Went to bed, woke up the next day to an email. You want to come back and do Anaheim, Edmonton? Jump back on a plane. Wound up doing a couple of games in the second round. And it was just kind of like you kind of earned it as you went along. And I did those first 4 games. They decided it was worth another game. And then I did that first series and they're like, you know what? Let's have them do a couple of games in the second round. And then the next year it was kind of, okay, now you've done it. Now you get a couple of regular season games and just kind of progress that way. And so, I'm fortunate I was able to get that opportunity. I was fortunate I didn't screw it up enough to get kicked off of that opportunity. And it just kind of progressed through my 5 seasons in the NHL to last year. I did, I don't even know, 30 regular season games. I wound up doing close to 100 games last year, even though there was a shortened season. So, my proximity to the Stamford, Connecticut studios helped where, Kenny and I we're an hour away and just run up and do games whenever I didn't have an Islander game. So really fortunate that the NBC opportunity came about and I was able to do as many games as I did over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Was it easy for you to work with MSG networks in regards to doing that extra work? And were there times where you had to turn down a game because obviously you're committed to the Islanders? And what's that relationship like for you? Being able to go to your bosses and saying, hey, I have this opportunity to do something here. Maybe it's going to impact my arrival time for something else, or travel or whatnot. And how important was that in order for you to get in the national stage?
Yeah, no, MSG's been great. And they've been very, very okay with me being able to do anything I could that didn't impact the Islander broadcast, right? So if I was, if I was at home on a Tuesday and home on a Thursday and they wanted me to go somewhere, or they wanted me to go to Stanford on Wednesday and come back, no problems, right? Travel obviously is a little bit different, so during a regular season, it's, you don't want to necessarily risk flying in on the day of a game and miss that. So there's been some times where NBC's asked me to do games that just haven't worked out. And there's been some times where MSG has gone, listen, it's April, it's a morning flight. You've got all day to get back. We're not as concerned that you're going to miss a flight because of weather or whatnot. So yeah, you can do that game in DC and we'll see you, in Columbus on Monday type of thing. So they've been reasonable when it comes to not just a blanket, no, you can't go and do that game. They've worked with me on some things. They've coordinated together on playoff schedules where it's like, hey, we want him to do these games. Are you okay with this? And we've got that. So, it's been great. And obviously they have to deal with Kenny's schedule as well. So, they've got a good relationship, and they've been really, really nice about being able to, understand that, yes, my full-time job is the New York Islanders, and that takes precedence, but also how important it is for me and for my career. And I would imagine to have MSG go, hey, we've got two of the top, national hockey guys on our roster too here in New York City is a pretty cool thing for them. They've got Mike Breen on the basketball side. Like, they've got some high-end guys that do a lot of national games. So, it's a great company to work for, and fully understanding that it's a good thing for everybody if we're on the national stage as well.
Happy you mentioned travel, because I wanted to ask you some of your favorite places that you've gotten to travel to since you got the Islanders job. Yeah.
I always kind of say Montreal when I'm asked that question. It's a cool city, number one. But the Bell Center is a really special place to watch a game. It is the largest building in the NHL in terms of capacity, right? It's more than 20,000 fans. They are all engaged and loud in 2 different languages. And it's a really cool experience with all of, obviously it's not the Forum, but all the history of the Stanley Cups that have been won by that franchise, and just the diehard fan base they have there in Montreal. It's a special place to watch a game, hockey bucket list wise. And then, the rest of the NHL is great. I mean, the traveling is one of the best parts of my job, which is, unfortunate that it was so limited the last couple seasons of being able to do that. But there are some beautiful places, like Vancouver is a beautiful city. Vegas is fun, like the atmosphere they've created in that arena in Vegas. And what's really cool is for Vegas is how they've taken over that whole city. Like, there are logos everywhere. There is random people wearing their gear everywhere. And it has gone from, because they were the first, I'm sure there's Raiders stuff now. I think they put an eye patch on the Sphinx the other day. But like seeing the Statue of Liberty at New York with a Golden Knights jersey on, like, they've taken over that city, which is a really cool thing to see. Not only to have a city embrace the team, but to have it just be a dominant fixture in what is Vegas, right? Like, so that's a pretty cool market to have seen from its conception all the way through. And I'm excited about Seattle. I'm excited to see what Seattle's all about.
January 4th, you should be there if you're allowed to travel. Islanders at the Kraken.
Yeah. So, that's a great city. I've never really spent a lot of time in Seattle. I'm excited to spend some time in Seattle, and then to witness a new arena and the birth of a new franchise, and, kind of see that from the ground level will be a lot of fun.
Last question here. Obviously, the Blues games, for the sentimental reasons and what they did for your career up until that point and after it, were pretty special for you. What were your favorite regular season games or playoff games that you could list off the top of your head? I know it's very difficult to answer a question like that, but do any of them stick out immediately and were ultimately really, really special for you to be a part of?
Well, I'll build off your point about the St. Louis games, which are to be able to go back and do a game in St. Louis after where I come from was pretty cool. I remember a game my first year was in December in Buffalo. Now, Buffalo is 4 hours from Utica, New York, but also pretty much the closest NHL team that you can get to Utica. So I made a trip from Utica to Buffalo to see a game. And it happened to be a Sabres Rangers game. The season before I got the Islanders job. And again, I have enough contacts. I got a credential. I went up to harass the broadcasters like I always do. And I went into the MSG booth and I saw Sam Rosen, who I'd known a little bit. And I just said, "Hi, Sam." And he asked what I was doing. I just came to hang out. And he said, "Well, you're welcome to sit in here if you'd like." And so I sat with Sam, kind of behind him, and just kind of watched, not really the game, just watched him, his rapport with Joe Micheletti, his interaction with the stage manager. I had a headset on so I could hear the truck and talking to him and just kind of get a feel for what he was going through and kind of study the TV side of it. So, I remember I took a picture of his back, right? He's working and I'm sitting behind him, and I took a picture on my phone of like, this is pretty cool to be able to watch Sam do this. And not a year later, I walked back into that booth and it was mine. And that was a really cool moment to just walk. And I don't even remember the game, right? Like, I don't remember what happened. It didn't matter. Like, it was just being back in that booth for the first time was a really special moment for me to be able to kind of, go, wow, this has been quite a year. So that was really cool. But, games off the top of my head, I mean, home opener, first year, Josh Bailey wins it in overtime against Anaheim. Just kind of like your first home game, and it ends with an overtime win, and just kind of the excitement in the first win of the season. That's a fun one to look back on. And then you've got the playoff games are all great, right? Like, the playoff games are playoff games. So be able to do playoff games. And, my first playoff game for the Islanders at the Coliseum was, another Josh Bailey overtime winner against Pittsburgh, and kind of that year where everybody had left the Islanders for dead, to have them, make the playoffs and have home ice advantage against Pittsburgh and win that game, and kind of start this run they've been on. That one certainly is one to look back on and remember as one of the more fun games that I've done. And the first game back at the Coliseum, right? Like, people forget, and I'm happy they do, is that I had never called a game at the Coliseum until they went back in January of 2019. So that night, to be able to, it always felt like something was missing as an Islander broadcaster to have never done a game at the Coliseum. It felt like I was cheating. Like, it felt like all of the fans were like, oh, you should have done a game at the Coliseum. Like, you don't know what it's like. And so to be able to go back there and do a game at the Coliseum, and that was a memorable game against Columbus, that they came from behind and won that game. That was a fun night. And then I think that anybody you'd ask who was there, you kind of have to say John Tavares coming back to the Coliseum as a Maple Leaf was one of the most memorable regular season games probably that building has ever seen. That was a circus that night, and it was
it was a very colorful night.
Yeah,
it was a colorful night.
It was memorable. It was memorable. That's for sure. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Brendan, for doing this with us. We really appreciate it. I thought you had amazing stories, awesome stories, unique stories. It was really, really cool that you got to kind of meet some broadcasters, some really great guys. I mean, Panger's unbelievable. Sam Rosen, obviously, Nick and I love him, legend here in New York. But again, thank you for taking your time, took a little extra time with us. Certainly, we definitely appreciate it. What we do here is we always give our guests the last word. So if there's anything else you would like to share or promote, season's coming up, just a few short weeks, the preseason's going to get here. I'm very excited for hockey season, and Nick and I, we wish you and your family the best of luck, the healthiest season coming up. And I'm not going to say go Islanders, but we wish you luck with the gig.
Well, I appreciate that, guys, and thanks to you both for having me on. I guess the one thing I'll say, because you mentioned a couple of people, the best thing, and I said travel is a great part of my job. The best thing about what I do is being able to interact with some of the best people in the sports world, and that's the broadcasters. So, whether it's Sam Rosen or Joe Micheletti, or we're going to say goodbye to Rick Jenneret this year in his final season in Buffalo, and just all the people that I get to meet along the way. One of my favorite things about each game is meeting up with the other broadcasters before the game and just kind of, chewing things over and exchanging notes and just, bouncing back and forth. We'll go into each other's booth between periods and things like that and just have fun. So, one of the best parts about the gig that nobody talks about is that it's full of a bunch of great people that get to do a very exclusive job around the NHL. And I don't think any of us take it for granted. And I think that's kind of the mentality that we have. And we all know how fortunate we are to be where we are. And so, it'll be great when we get back on the road and can kind of rekindle some of those friendships in person again this year. So that's probably what I'm most looking forward to here this season, if we can get back out on the road and start to see each other once again.
No doubt about it. It's a real camaraderie. You're all in very unique positions, and not too many of you. So it's really a brotherhood, and you can kind of sense that it comes across when we see people interact with each other. But Brendan, we want to thank you so much for your time. We appreciated your stories. That's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our very special guest, Brendan Burke, and my co-host, Joe Calabrese. I am Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.